Welcome to the American Reformer Podcast, hosted by Josh Abbotoy and Timon, Cline. Our mission is to promote a vigorous Christian approach to the cultural challenges of our day, rooted in the rich tradition of Protestant social and political thought.
All right, welcome back, everyone, to the American Reformer Podcast. Usual host here, Timon Cline, Editor-in-Chief of American Reformer, and I am joined today, as I often am, by a guest in the studio. And today I have George Sayour, and many of you, especially PCAers out there, may know George. And but for those that don't, could you briefly introduce yourself, George, to the audience, and then we'll get into our topic for the day.
Sure. Thanks for having me on, Timon. So I'm a PCA pastor, have been for almost 10 years. Before that, I was a ruling elder. Before that, I was a deacon. I started my career as a mechanical engineer and manager with Procter & Gamble. So I have a kind of a varied experience, and I'm just leaving being the senior pastor of a church in North Carolina called Meadowview to be the minister to the state capital of Florida. And Ministry to State is a ministry of the PCA through Mission in North America, M&A. And I'm going to be the guy ministering to elected officials and government workers in Florida for the glory of God and their souls and the good of our state. Yeah.
So they have souls too. You're telling me these politicians.
Yes, despite what you've heard, they are not soulless. They actually need soul care, and that's just a great role to have. I mean, historically, our government has always had chaplains in almost every arena in government, and they almost don't have that anywhere now. So, yeah.
Or it's like maybe we should have chaplains in every airport too, because you see these, quote unquote chapels, and they're sort of these, they're presented as like ecumenical places, but they're all, the only people you'll find in them are usually Muslims, actually, who take the time at the airport. In any case, yes, I think, it seems to me to be a unique ministry. I don't know if other denominations have an equivalent of ministry to state, but then it's also surprising to me how few people in the PCA, relatively speaking, I haven't surveyed all, whatever it is, 350,000 of them, but are just unaware that this is part of the PCA's ministry, and it's something that they're invested in, which I think is a good thing. And what it strikes me as providing it for our particular discussion is a sort of concrete basis to begin talking about, sort of a concrete occasion to talk about the roles that are in play here, because it necessarily brings these up. Why would the PCA have this kind of ministry other than just, we don't want, there's lots of people we don't want to go to hell, but why would, why do we think it's important to focus on the magistrates at the state level, which I think is a appropriately like American way to organize this, is to focus on the states in this way. Why do we do this? What role do we think the pastor is playing when he enters the state house, when it's in session, and talks to governors and legislators, even when it's not in session? What's he trying to accomplish? Why is he there from a sort of biblical and reformed theological perspective?
Sure. Well, just boots on the ground. I think it's almost like all Christians want to be involved in politics or understand how to influence politics one way or another. And ministry to state is a great model for how to do that. And honestly, it started very organically the way this is going on. As I've been getting to talk at churches and stuff, I'm finding a lot of things are going on, even at the local level and very, just community levels, where pastors or church members are doing Bible studies for people working, their city councilmen or whatever. It kind of like a need presents and it happens. So ministry to state is over 25 years old. It started after the Oklahoma City bombing, because there was already a Bible study going on for government in Oklahoma. And the pastor, I don't know if it was a ruling elder or just a member, asked the pastor to help with this Bible study. And he kind of begrudgingly did it. And then the Oklahoma City bombing happened, and he realized how, because they had this going on, he was in a unique position to minister in a very high stress, high pressure situation. And ministry to state was born out of that. And, really the biblical, my theme verse for this is 1 Timothy 2, where it says, first of all, then I urge that supplications, prayers, intercessions, and thanksgivings be made for all people, for kings and all who are in high position. So I always say, for those who are in authority over us, that we may lead a peaceful and quiet life, godly and dignified in every way. And what I love about that is the first thing Paul tells you is it's in your best interest. And if you were to talk to most churches, most pastors, most Christians, they would say that's a very base motivation for praying, that you're praying for something that's in your own self-interest. And here Paul tells you very clearly that we may lead a peaceful and quiet life, godly and dignified in every way. And then it says that the Lord wants all people to be saved and to come to the knowledge of truth. So clearly there's an evangelistic thing. And we know that for real change to happen, the heart needs to be changed first. But, Timon, again, I worked in the corporate world. I'm very used to very high pressure situations where your identity gets wrapped up in your role and your experience and your successes and your failures. So much more in politics. And politicians, particularly in state government, also at the federal level, they don't live there, and so they're away from home. And when you're away from your family and your community and your church, it gets real easy to get isolated and to really challenge your deepest beliefs for, the more base desires of the soul. And so to have somebody there, our motto is people, not politics, but clearly I'm a PCA pastor. I believe the Westminster Standards, I subscribe to them. I believe they best reflect the scriptures. And that's the paradigm by which I'm discipling people, or seek to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then so this is always interesting to review as you did, this sort of, there's an interest, the reason we're praying for magistrates and ministering to them, beyond caring for their souls as people, right, is this self-interest first and foremost from that passage for the church, right, for the peace of the church, for the tranquility, and the ability, so a lot of people don't go on to live godly lives, right? To have a godliness in your communities. So this interest of the church, and particularly looking to the magistrate, why is it, and how is it that engaging with the magistrates, we're just using this as a general term, enables these things, so we've already talked about, well, we want magistrates there. They don't have people ministering to them. It's a place of isolation and temptation potentially. So that's not good for their souls. But then, how are we to think about the church's interest when we're engaging the magistrates, and what their capabilities and duties are there? According to our standards, which I think are good ones. That's why I believe in them and hold to them. So what do we preach to the magistrates in this scenario to call them to their office and duty in this regard in light of 1 Timothy?
Sure. Well, I'll get to maybe your specific question, maybe in a roundabout way, but the Westminster Standards, chapter 23 says that the Lord raises up, has ordained civil magistrates to be under him over all people. It says first for his glory, his own glory. And then it says, and the public good. And then it, uses Romans 13 and 1 Peter 2 to kind of talk about upholding the good and punishing the wicked. But I think it's interesting that it says, first of all, under him. So these are not autonomous rulers. And, we know the history of Christianity is, that's what put Christianity in the crosshairs of the Roman Empire and everywhere else they ever went, because Christians were basically saying, you Caesar, you Pharaoh, Old Testament context, you're under God, you're not God, And then it says for his own glory. So it's hard to imagine, now everything works for God's glory. We're reformed, we know that, but it's hard to imagine that a magistrate operating in his wickedness, I mean, God's glory is going to be shown in God's judgment of that magistrate, not in the magistrate's actions themselves. And so, we are pointing them to uphold the glory of God and the good of the people that they're over. Chapter 23 also talks about, that it's their duty to protect the church of our Lord. And, I don't know why we need to be apologetic about that as Christians. If we believe that we know the truth and the truth will set you free, and we have the best expression of the moral law reflected in natural law or whatever, why would we, wouldn't that not be loving neighbor, not to seek to promote that in society? Like, this is a love of neighbor thing, as much as it is anything else. Did that answer your question or get to it in any way?
I think so. I mean, just from the standards there, this is part of your point is we're approaching everything we do, not so our evangelism to an individual. Obviously, if you're evangelizing them, it's because you believe you have the truth. If you're unsure about that, why would you go out and evangelize them into not just Christianity, but even our particular brand and confessional version of Christianity, that we think is best synthesis and reflection of what Scripture teaches, right? Why would you pull them to that as opposed to anything if you don't really believe it? But we do, and no one would question that with evangelism of the individual. So the same with preaching to the magistrate or teaching them of their duties according to our standards. Same impetus, I would say, and same confidence should be behind it. And the fact that they have public duties doesn't change that in my mind. Calling them, it's the duty of all people to respond to the gospel and to believe it and to submit to Christ. And you preach that to the magistrate as an individual, but then further in our standards, he has these outward and public duties for society, and he's going to be promoting something. So we should evangelize him in this way because we think it's true, and it's what Scripture teaches, that he should be promoting the true religion in this way, to according to his station and abilities and all these things. And last thing I would say is clearly the standard, you mentioned Pharaoh earlier. So one way or another, God's going to be glorified through his instruments and his means, even if it's in their judgment. So I think it's important to tell the magistrate that story. It's going to happen one way or the other. Do you want to be Pharaoh, or do you want to be, someone that gets a little bit better treatment in the Old Testament? At times Nebuchadnezzar does. Which one do you want? Because this is the biblical standard.
Yeah. Or the king of Nineveh, right? Nineveh, he was going to he was going to get Pharaoh's future, and he repents.
Yeah, and leads his people to do it too, right? So this is there's some evangelistic aspect that even the magistrate has, if it's kind of less direct or implicit. And
what you just said there, by the way,
yeah.
What you just said there is so interesting and key. And I've been thinking a lot about this also. When we think of Israel, even the nation had revival in as much as the magistrate, the king, was a good king or not a good king. The leadership of the nation drove the country one way or the other. And so there were real heart changes during Josiah's reign and others' reign, but it always started with the king, which is really interesting. And it's so counterintuitive that we think, and maybe that's why Paul wanted to go and speak to the rulers over, the governor, the Roman governor over Judea, and Caesar himself over Rome, because in as much as the moral law is being reflected in society, we're such a law gospel people nowadays in the PCA and in Reformed circles that it's almost like, no, the law is only the bad news. But the law provides for human flourishing, which is what the progressives always want. And if human flourishing is there, is that not fertile ground for the gospel to spread? But we're afraid to say these things. So anyway, just a thought just to key in what you just said.
I think that's totally right. I mean, I've written on this before elsewhere, but it used to be this total right as Reformed people, especially now today, we're kind of and there's something to this, but you're not going to fully embrace even the moral law, if you're unregenerate, right? You're not going to embrace it in your heart. and so on and so forth, which is true. On the other hand, it was a very common position up through the 18th century that a lawful society and the law itself is preparatory for the gospel, not just in confronting you with your sin that makes you realize you need a savior, but creating the conditions where Christianity is plausible to a lot of people. So if you live in a society where gender is fluid and mothers can murder their babies, it is not as plausible that you're going to accept and embrace the Trinitarian God. It just doesn't work that way, right? You're in such a haze. You don't even understand reality. So how could you understand higher truths, right? And so both of these things are true, but I think we've overemphasized one, or sort of hung our hat on one without recognizing, I don't know, what the Bible teaches you about how people work, just how they understand things. And you don't have to adopt a particular like apologetic brand, or team to understand this. I'm not playing the apologetics team sport game. I'm pretty utilitarian on whatever gets you there, but it's like,
Right.
so this kind of, that's part of the interest in caring about what the magistrates are doing, because they're creating these conditions for you. So that's what I was kind of getting at. I don't know if that is flowing with what you're saying.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I almost think it's like the blessings that we have in America from its founding forward. I mean, my family, so my dad's parents are Syrian immigrants. My mom's grandparents are, and I knew them. I knew both they loved America when they came here for what America had to offer, and they believed it was a blessing of God. They came over as Christians, Syrian Christians. So my point in that is, I don't know why there's this apology in America now where we act like all the blessings that America is, the reason why everybody in the world wants to come here, like that we're not willing to say it's because of our view of the world based on Christianity, like it's our Christianity that's motivated us to have a nation like this. And it's almost like we'd rather, attribute it to liberalism or modernity or who knows what. I don't know. I'm not a historian or any of that to understand like what it's being attributed to, but I don't know how it can't be attributed to our people say Judeo-Christian, whatever. It's because we're Christians. This is the kind of nation and government and environment we've provided that makes everybody want to come here. And like I said, my grandparents understood that. And I think I was trying to get at this with Stephen Wolf on my podcast. Like, was that historically the immigrants' view when they were coming here? But let's say it wasn't. So you have pagans coming here and they want to come here and they say, wow, look at America. Look at the shelves, look at the home, the shelves in supermarkets, the homes, the environments, the freedom, the safety you have. And why wouldn't that be one of the greatest evangelistic tools to say, yeah, we have this because our Lord has blessed us and we honor him and his name is Jesus Christ.
No, I think that's right. I mean, the recognition, there's good, in spite of the authors most of the time, there's good historical work on like, up through the 19th century, any American you asked would have just said it's a Christian nation. And they would connect, rightly or wrongly, it doesn't matter whatever they put sort of insert here. They would connect the things they like about it to Christianity. They'd say because it's a Christian nation, we have XYZ thing. And so you could quibble on like those conclusions, but the point is the good things they attributed to Christianity and that it's Christian people. The law recognizes Christian people over and over again. And the, early on, even prior to what we call the American founding, this was like intentionally constructed in many ways. I mean, but, I'm like right down the middle, English and German. And my German ancestors came over in like the 1730s as part of this initiative from Queen Anne in England to get the reform. They were reformed, German reformed in the Palatinate, which was being like oppressed in many ways and had a hard time. So the English government said, we're going to pull these Protestants out and take them to America to further Protestantize it. to maintain like this Protestant interest. So this is intentional in many ways in the colonization. You had, crazy people come too, but the general idea was we're going to create Protestant colonies, ones that are agreeable to us. It is going to be a Protestant place, and we'll all kinds of Protestants, but we just want them. This sort of international Protestantism is going to be there, and to really to combat what they would have said at the time, to combat the Antichrist. This is there, right? So it's intentionally done, in some ways intentionally by magistrates to create this place. So you can't deny it, and it's reflected all over the place in their laws and their way of life, their church attendance, so on and so forth. So it's just like a historical fact. I don't know why people want to run from this or adopt sort of reinterpretive liberal, truisms about this or something that they sort of baptize, but it's very self-defeating. But it's just factually untrue, and as Christians, we shouldn't accept these kinds of explanations. We should be proud of them. And I think the benefit to that, to get to my point, is like in America, there's still, even among non-Christians, sort of nascent, patriotism. It's still, they want to be good Americans. And so if you can teach them that part of being a good American is this, is being a Christian, this is just part of our culture, you at least have to act like it. I think it can actually go a long way for a lot of people. They're able to then connect the dots, but there's no one really even, you could say, preaching this historical story that like Tocqueville recognized and everyone else did for a long time. To say to be a good American, it's not to be a secularist, it's not to be a liberal, it's not to be whatever this story of an Enlightenment intellectual has been told to you, but it's to be a serious Protestant Christian, basically. Yeah,
absolutely.
In any case, so the rant aside, why is it why do you think, in evangelicalism generally, in Reformed circles in particular, we sort of have the discussions over like what we're talking about now and political theology generally are like somewhat contentious. Like people are uncomfortable with them one way or the other. One, how do you if you disagree with that, please say so. But then two, like why do you think, at least your experience, that is the case? Like why does this have to be a contentious discussion, or at least a foreign one that people are uncomfortable with? Given what we're talking about here, that there's concrete implications for what you think about this in the way the church engages government and in the type of country we live in.
Yeah, I guess what is the old adage? Don't talk about religion or politics, and definitely don't mix them, right? So I think my own analysis, and I'm not studied on this. I don't know the reading on it, but maybe 50 years ago. So I'm 50. So maybe 50 years ago, or maybe 70 years ago, I don't know. Like the difference between maybe the political parties was more policy based on, and maybe less morality based. Or policies weren't necessarily around morality, although all policy is moral. I get that. So my point is, it's like how much to tax people, what social programs to offer or not offer, what regulations to have or not to have. I can understand how Christians would, or the church would want to stay out of those discussions, even though I understand there's real implications for that. Because first of all, we're not experts in those things. And second of all, maybe that's creating division where we're trying to reach people that we don't need. But the problem is, like, I don't think most of the church has caught up with the political discussions we're having now are questioning the reality of the nature of reality. What is gender? What is marriage? What is real? What is, and so we're operating off of maybe a mid-last century church state model, which says, hey, we are a Christian nation, so we don't need to really assert that. And these decisions that are being made, it's just about big government or little government, and let's just stay out of those things. But now, like, yeah, we're slaughtered. And of course, 50 years ago is Roe, so, we slaughtered millions and millions of babies. We think anybody can be married to anybody. We have Supreme Court justices that are making decisions on the law of the land, and they can't define what a woman is. Like, this is, to use Doug Wilson, I mean, this is clown world. It really is. And then we're actually saying chopping off the genitals of minors is a right. And, in some countries you can be put in prison if you're a parent who opposes that. And it's like, well, no, the church has a lot to say on these things. And the way I say it in churches is like my role, again, it's people, not politics. I'm not there to directly influence policy. I want people to see the transforming power of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the nature of reality in Jesus Christ, who's upholding creation, who is the logos, the logic, the rationality that is the nature of reality. I just want them to meet him, and I want to help them. But what does it mean to stay out of politics? So if I preach, or if I just read Genesis 1, so I'm not even, reading Romans 1. If I just read Genesis 1, it says, in the beginning, he made them male and female. He made them in his image. He made them. I mean, what is that? Okay, that's a theological statement. It's an ontological statement, meaning being. It's a moral statement, but it's a political statement, because we have courts and governments trying to say if that's even true, so it's more and more Christians are going to have to realize that everything in the Bible now is a political statement. And, now that we have to be, I think we need to be wise as serpents, gentle as doves, and savvy about how we're, talking about those things. But I don't understand why our worldview, which is the true worldview, we're supposed to keep that on the shelf. So,
yeah, I think this. I don't think this distinction is like contradictory at all. I mean, you're not a lobbyist, right? In the way people understand this today, right? So you're not political in that sense, but it's very much. To like stretch the analogy a little bit, it's very much like the ideal you would have, the people that wrote our confessions would have had, which is the king, generally speaking, would have like theologians around him or preachers around him. And their job, there are times like George III took in his childhood tutor, a Scotsman, with him into office, and then let him start running foreign affairs and stuff, and it was disastrous. They had to get rid of him. So pastors aren't, even back then when they were very capable, aren't really ready to run countries usually. But in general, the idea was not that they would do that, but that they are educating and conditioning like the prince, right? This way you have all this literature, like Erasmus is still in print, Education of the Christian Prince. And there's nothing sort of that's nitty gritty policy about it in the whole book. There's nothing. He's not telling him, what sort of what we would identify as policy prescriptions, but he's telling him about what kind of character he should have. Obviously, true religion, how he should be virtuous, how he should treat his people, what things he should prioritize because it's what God prioritizes. These things. It's very natural to have this kind of this role for pastors and theologians around rulers, and we should want that. And they're not being tapped then to also fill a role in the Senate or something. They play this what used to be thought of as a central role, and that's kind of how I see this now more than ever. To be, or if you want, we need a pagan analogy as our country goes this way. Take Daniel or someone. This is not just, we have a snippet of his life in the Bible. Like, what's he really doing most of the time as he gains trust of rulers? I mean, he's doing this kind of stuff, right? Through example and through his own preaching. So I think this is totally a natural role to be filled, and I don't see this as like presenting a strange conflict at all. Even though maybe some people find it strange. I'm not sure.
Yeah, look, I'm old enough to remember what it was like in the 80s and to now, and things that people are calling absurd now were just a part of the world I lived in back then. Mm-hmm. Like I'm talking about like even blue laws, mm-hmm. Like I remember when things were actually closed on Sundays. You mention that now and it's like, whoa, first table of the law, you're a Christian nationalist, you're a nut. Yeah. And it's like, there are still places that have vestiges of these things. And so things are changing so rapidly that things that are, I mean, I always say, like, Bill Clinton right now would be one of the best Republican presidents we'd ever have. Like, because everything has shifted, the whole Overton window conversation. But you got to remember, every Democrat politician was affirming biblical marriage just 20 years ago. Yeah. And so the idea that we are extremists, when in our lifetimes we've seen the change, is a bit of like snobbery, honestly. And I think history is going to look back on this time as clown world, honestly. I mean, I hope. I think, things have a tendency to swing from one side to the other. We think it's always this slide into chaos, but there is a way of things do correct.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's like a very positive thing for a lot of us that are, have been unhappy the last few years, to say, man, there's brighter days ahead here.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. I mean, first term Obama was unsure about gay marriage, right? He wouldn't affirm it out the gate. So that's a huge change, certainly in my lifetime, where now it's a requirement for any Democrat, not just to accept it, but to be almost flamboyantly supportive of it. It's a whole constituency now. This sort of thing. But yeah, there's total case to be made that like Trump is like a under socialized Bill Clinton. It's like basically how like what he is. If you in any case, I think that's right. Things do shift very rapidly and change quickly. And so I think it is interesting to see evangelicals as sort of this block that is resistance to potential corrective change in many ways, almost because, as you mentioned earlier, they haven't realized how things have changed so rapidly, like under their feet, even in just a decade. And so they're kind of doggedly clinging to norms or like principles that they thought were holding things together that were clearly ineffective at doing so, right? And these, I don't know. I mean, I find it strange how often evangelicals sort of baptized like these foreign kind of principles or standards of governance and society that are not really, it's not like they've sprung from Christian theology or historic theology, but they've like so embraced them that they become almost immobile. They're just sort of stuck in these things. So on sort of the flip side of your role to the state, how do you think about how you're supposed to help other evangelicals and Reformed Protestants, think about things that are happening culturally, but also politically? Do you see yourself as also trying to educate the laity that are in our churches to understand not just what you're doing and why it's important, but also the environment that they're actually in, not the environment of 50 years ago?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So MNA, Mission to North America, like they have two main focuses. One is church planting and another is church vitality. And so for Ministry to State to be a part of MNA, we need to have church engagement going on. And so that's a large part of my role. And right now I'm in fundraising mode. I mean, my position is 100% supported by donors. MNA doesn't pay me. So if you're in Florida and you're listening, I want to meet you. But the point is that is actually a good thing, because I'm in churches. Like I just preached and taught at a church yesterday. And last month I was in a church in Jacksonville, and I did a Sunday school class on, political theology, public theology, and then preached. And it was a really cool thing, because again, officially I don't start till January 1st, even though my call is with MNA right now. I'm not on the payroll yet. So I do this whole thing. It was right after the Charlie Kirk assassination. We know how that's affected everybody in, regardless of demographic or age, but also young men in particular, and all this conversations around, the young men and radicalization or whatever you want to say. I don't know. So I get a call from the pastor of that church after I was there, and he had these two guys in their 20s who happened to be traveling up the coast and was going to be in Washington, D.C., and wanted to meet the team that we have, Ministry to State, because there's actually a team of people in the federal government. And so I was able to connect them. These guys did breakfast with them, the pastors in D.C., the PCA pastors in Ministry to State, toured them around, showed them what they could be praying for. And my point in saying this is, like, there's really constructive ways to not stifle the political energy and impulses that young people have, young men have, and redirect it in godly ways for, the good of the country and that is honoring to Christ. And so that's one thing that just happened on its own. And I, of course, take that from the Lord, but there's all kinds of ways. Like I said, everybody when I talk to a church, I say everybody wants to be involved in politics. Even those that are saying the church shouldn't be involved in politics are making political statements. And then when you evaluate their own life, they're doing tons of political things. It's just maybe the opposite of what the rest of you are doing. So the Bible has tons to say about this. And so let's look at, you mentioned Daniel. Of course, we know Joseph. We could think of Nehemiah, Esther. Paul and Peter had a lot to do in politics. So the kingdom of God is here and it's advancing. And, I think the political order views that as a threat. And in a lot of ways, they probably should, but I don't think in the way they think. Because when the gospel influences an area, things get better for everyone. Mm-hmm. And that's a good thing. And so, I look forward to going around. I know the guy in North Carolina where I came from, he used to do 4 and 5 week classes at churches, just covering this stuff and helping Christians to understand their citizenship in heaven, but also their citizenship here on earth and how to rightly prioritize. And there is a right priority. I mean, Paul says, for our citizenship is in heaven, and from it we await a Savior. He says this in the book of Philippians to a Roman colony of Roman citizens who are viewing their Roman citizenship as their primary identity, and Paul is recentering it on Christ. But we are still in the world, and so we still live as citizens here too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the Charlie Kirk stuff, what it's revealed is fascinating. There's like tons of analysis of which way this is going to go. But I think the main thing you highlighted there that I think especially pastors need to adopt as their perspective is like not to stifle or sort of reject and try to put down the energy you're talking about. Like when guys that are 20 years old recognize there's something wrong and that society is not healthy, and it's especially detrimental to them. It's not very excited about, especially young white men. We see so many New York Times can't stop talking about it in this way. They're very scared. So when they recognize all that and kind of see it, instead of saying, no, don't believe your lying eyes, to try to, disciple them is exactly what pastors should be doing, and trying to direct their energy in a constructive way. This is how you would meet, most situations like this previously. But there's something about the current moment that is confusing people, and it's like I would say it's a huge opportunity for the church. There's young men that want to lead and that are in general clear-eyed about the way the world is, because this is the only thing they've grown up in. They don't have memory of the 1980s or the 90s or anything good, really. They're 20 years old, so they're very sort of aware of like the way the world is, and don't have happier memories to sort of subdue that. No nostalgia, and they so the church should be sort of sucking them up and trying to prepare them for leadership. I think it's exactly the right response. And to your point, sort of latter point about the distinction between our eternal destiny and our temporal kind of reality. I think that too is for some reason, evangelicals have found, we could say, too much comfort in the first recognition that, like, well, you are bound for eternity with Christ, and this is great. And that's kind of the end of it, without any kind of recognition or embrace of duties given now, at least socially or politically. Do you have an idea of like why that is? Because I don't think most people do it like with their family. You know, a godly man at church thinks it's his job while he's on this side of heaven to raise his kids and lead his family the right way. Why is there this sort of break though after that? If like there's this chasm between family and church, and there's like nothing else in between.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on that, and they probably are different, but then they intertwine. I mean, in one sense, there was a backlash, I think, against the religious right, moral majority of the 70s and 80s, and the Jerry Falwells and all that, and the church tried to do things more. What the analysis was, it was pushing people away, so it was creating this like Christian us against them mentality as opposed to like us for them. And so, then you have the seeker sensitive movement comes about, and it's all about trying to, win people over with what they want. But what happened is like the elites, or those who wanted to be viewed as intellectual and elites, and maybe those in cities and stuff like that, like that just looked like cheesy Christianity,
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why the whole quote unquote missional movement to me is just an intellectual version of the seeker sensitive movement. So it's we're not going to try to win people over with, by making church like what they like, their music and their preferences. And, like Matthew Everhart says, a TED talk in a concert or whatever he calls it. So we're going to show them we're intellectually like them, and we're, and then we can, but what's interesting is, the people that say that about like, it's our heavenly destiny is more important than we're not supposed to look for the, earthly blessings here. They don't really believe it, because what they're trying to do is make peace with the world so that they can live more comfortably in the world. And so in essentially they're saying one thing, but the product is another. So they can live in willful, like just sort of, well, this is all going to hell in a handbasket, so it doesn't matter. And they can adopt the world and incorporate into the world and not actually have to live countercultural. And so they're getting what everybody wants, but they're pretending like they're not doing it, because first of all, we're not Gnostics. We know the God cares very much about the world. And again, I read 1 Timothy 2. The first thing is so that you would live a peaceful, quiet life. So God cares of the world our families are growing up in and living in, and all those things. But what's happening is, because Christianity is, I do believe in, I love Aaron Wren's work on the negative world. And so that you lose social capital by being overtly Christian. So isn't it much easier to say, well, this doesn't matter, so I'm going to, be liked by the world, and that's fine, so those are just probably a lot of different ideas that come together.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot to all those. And there's going to be, a multiplicity of like causality for why the Christians generally and individually, and then the church itself does this. And there's, it's going to be always complicated to unravel, but I think all those things are true, at least in some regard, for most people. That's why their posture is the way it is, and then some of it is because they're just not being taught anything different. Maybe they would like something different, but once you get certain things as positioned as like the default, it's very hard to adjust that. So there's just sort of a default way to coast, and I think most pastors would like just to live the quiet, peaceable, and godly life, and like preach the gospel on Sundays and not have to worry about this. But it's not the world we live in anymore. You can do that. That's the whole point. If you have godly magistrates, the pastor's job outside the church is very minimal. He gets to just do his primary duties, but you don't have to worry about many things. But that's just not what we have now. George, I wanted to ask to the, you mentioned earlier that this is really starting for you at the beginning of the new year. Where should people contact you or get in touch with you so that they can, one, learn more about what you're doing or partner with you, have you, as you're talking about, down to their church to speak on these things, to teach, so on and so forth? Where should people reach out to you? How should they get in touch?
Oh, thanks for that. Yeah. So ministrytostate.org/Florida is my page. And from there you can access everything, how you can support me, how you can email me. A good email for me is george@ministrytostate.org. Very easy. You can learn about it. You can see our mission, how we go about it. And yeah, I do. I need churches and I need individuals that will want to support me, both now and ongoing. And I hope that's seen as valuable, that you would see it as valuable, that I'm there ministering to your representatives, your senators within the state. And honestly, like I don't want to be on an island. So yeah, if you know of somebody that needs ministry up here, that needs somebody to listen to them, whatever, connect me with them. And that'll be that's actually a softer landing when I go up to these people. I can say, so-and-so says hi, and they want you to know they're praying for you. And I can be your kind of arm up here. I mean, you can imagine everybody in government, anybody that wants to talk to them wants something from them. Everybody except me. Yeah. I'm there for them. So I want to give them something, whereas everybody else wants to get something from them. And so there's a lot of hesitancy and a lot of suspicion. And, I'm going to be praying for everybody in government. I'll have them all on a calendar, a few a day. I'm going to write them little note cards. I'm going to go hand deliver them. Probably won't be able to go meet them, but I'll give it to their aide or their assistant. And the testimony of the guys doing this in other states, and even the person who was doing this in Florida before me, is the next time you go to that office, there will be a percent that will say, oh, Representative so-and-so or Senator so-and-so said the next time you come back to let you in. And you get 5 or 10 minutes with them. You could tell them you're praying for them. So that's, I hope to be able to do Bible studies for them. Again, Jonathan Craig before me was able to do that. And he had people that worked for the governor go into the Bible studies and stuff. So I hope if you're in Florida and you see the value of that, if the Lord puts on your heart, would you consider supporting the ministry? And then you say, well, I'm not in Florida, because I know this is a national podcast. Well, wouldn't you like one of these in your state? And we're only in 8 states. And so through my ministry, I pray that I elevate the awareness of ministry to state and through that, the importance of it, such that I can, I don't want to say yet, it's not official, but I've already helped one state get a minister to state, because that's kind of what I do in the PCA. I'm like a matchmaker. And I want to do that in other states. And in the meantime, if you like what's going on in Florida and wish your state had more of that, well, a rising tide is going to raise all ships. So as it goes well in this state and maybe in other states, hopefully that will influence the rest of the country. And lastly on that, you may think, well, there's a lot of Christianity in Florida government already. And there is, by the way. And so, maybe this isn't really that needed. Really? There's a lot of wacky Christianity and going on in government, a lot of weird stuff, even the federal government and the state governments. And, I'm a PCA pastor doing this from a Reformed perspective, who understands the sovereignty of God and hopefully a good political and public theology. And I really hope it's going to change lives for them, for the glory of God, and for the good of our state. So, yeah.
Excellent. Well, we'll drop those links in the show notes as well. And they should, of course, go listen to your podcast as well, George, for all kinds of fun content and interviews and things. But thank you again for coming on to, one, introduce everybody to the ministry to state, and then to talk about some of these things, these topics surrounding what you're doing or that are in the discussion. These topics that need to continue to be addressed. So thank you for your time and for coming on, being generous with your time. And thank you, audience, for tuning in as always. And until next time, God bless.
You can find American Reformer on the internet at www.americanreformer.org or on x.com, formerly Twitter, at @AMReformer. Don't forget to like, rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. Please consider supporting us today by making a tax-deductible donation through our secure online donation portal at americanreformer.org. That's AmericanReformer.org.